Hey everyone, and welcome back to Barn Find Restorations. I know it's been a while since I've done a video, but we're gonna dive right back into it. We got our internet stuff sorted out. We're gonna start with this Farmall A project we have here, and if you have one that is leaking really badly from the rear end, particularly from either side of the transmission or these drop cases right here, I'm gonna show you what to anticipate and how to get in there and fix it. For any of the followers who are wondering whatever happened to our John Deere B project, it is right behind me. I had to wait all summer to get the engine head back from it, and we finally got it back, so we're going to finish up this project and then we're going to move all of our attention into that one and get that finished up. But first, let's dive into this one. All right, so for starters, I already did the left-hand side of this because that was easier. I just want to get it done and out of the way. So I'm going to be showing you guys how to do the right-hand side because that is the harder side. There is the platform and the pedals. And how to get started on that. So I have another Farmall A actually sitting outside that I will go outside and show you what you need to take apart on that. But one thing for starters is you're going to want to take off the PTO. I would recommend it because there's a gasket around there that you should just replace while you're doing it already. And when you're trying to slide the axle back in, it's easier to grab your gears in there and move it around so you can get it to slide in, because when you're holding the gearbox, it can be kind of hard to do that. So I'll go outside quick and show you what you need to start on that, and then we'll come back in here. All right, so this Farmall A is very similar to the one we have inside. It came with the same apparatus on the back for lifting a plow. You're gonna wanna take that off. It's not very complicated. There's a bracket on this side if you have it, and then there's a bolt down below, same thing. All this stuff just unhooks really easily. These two parts will pull apart. It's a lot easier than it looks. And then you're going to want to take your drawbar off because you'll need that. And then when you get into the PTO, there's just bolts that go all the way around. And actually you'll want to take this pulley assembly off first. So there's 4 bolts that just slides right off. And then obviously take your fenders off. There is just a series of bolts on the inside. Another series of bolts on the inside, kind of hard to see. You'll want to take off your seat. That's pretty straightforward too. There's just 3 bolts in, hard to see. 3 bolts in there, and then your seat will come off. Same story on the other side. So get your seats off, get your fenders off, get your drawbar off, all this, kind of clear it all up. And then as for taking the platform off, so this will be easier to get at if your fenders are off. You'll want to disconnect your brake. You'll want to take this pan off, which is, there's 2 bolts in the front here, and then there's 2 or 3 on the back side, I believe. And then all these little bolts in the front here, you'll want to take all those off. And there'll be 2 up on the inside. I can see them right up in there. There's 2 up there. There's some back there. Take off all the bolts, and then the only thing that should be holding this stuff together is, you can kind of see in these notches, there's a spring that goes through your pedals. So I know I kind of blew through that, but I will go back inside and show you more detailed of what that looks like. All right, so we're back in on the project one that we're actually working on. I'm sorry if that kind of went fast or didn't make any sense. Just take your time on this stuff. These are the springs I was talking about right here. There's 1 on each pedal. This pedal for this brake is bolted just to the platform, and it's not hooked to anything else. This brake pedal goes through to the other side, and this is your clutch, so it's hooked in right there. With that one, we'll disconnect and drop off on its own. So then all this stuff is cleared away, then you can get ready to start taking this stuff off. So most of the time when these leak, it's because there is a, I don't know if you want to call it a dust seal, inside here on the side of the transmission. Same on this side. That goes bad and then it leaks. And then there's weep holes. There's one right there. And there's one up in there. You can't really see it. But that's supposed to be a dry chamber, because on this side, that's where your brake is. Your brake is way over here on this side. But this is also should be a dry chamber. So when you start having oil pour out, it means that that seal is bad and you need to take it all apart. So one thing for starters is, so when you take off this piece right here, there's just 4 bolts that go around. That's one of the gaskets that was leaking. Then you can take off the 4 bolts around that piece and you can slide the axle out. When you slide the axle out, there is a big gear in here. You know, that's how it works, and it goes around. If you leave this pan on, it will drop into the pan and catch it for you, and then you can take the pan off. Something I would highly recommend, though, is because that is full of oil, I would recommend before you get to this step, unbolting that pan, dumping the oil out. It's going to make a mess. It goes everywhere because the fill hole is higher than the pan is, and there's nowhere to drain it. There's no drains on the bottom. So be prepared, drain the oil out first, then just put the pan on with 1 bolt on each side just to hold it. Then when you take this off, there'll just be a nut on the back side you take out and a little clip. This side had a different clip for some reason. I don't know what that's about. But just take out that bolt and then you can start sliding your axle out. And then it'll catch the gear in this piece, and then you can unbolt the 2 bolts you put back in and drop that gear out. Just warning again, it's going to be an oily mess. Have somewhere to put it, have something to catch oil, have lots of rags on hand and ready to go. So we're going to move forward. We're going to finish pulling this axle out, and then I will jump to unbolting this and sliding this out so you can see how to replace the seal in there. All right, so I have mine out. You can see it sitting down here. This is what it kind of looks like. To get mine out, I take a hammer and I tap around the back side of it. If you're gonna do that, just be careful because this is cast iron. So if you wail on it, you might break it because cast iron likes to shatter. So just take your time, just lots of small taps around in circles. Kind of just go what you're comfortable at hitting. I mean, this side I hit it with just like a regular nail hammer and it slid right out. This side took a little more work, but just be patient with it because if you break it, then you gotta try and replace it. So next, keep an eye on that bearing. More than likely it's gonna pop out one way or the other. I'd actually recommend taking it out, examining it, and then when you put this all back together, you'll have to try and hold that gear up from below and push the axle back through it, and then that's just another thing you have to fish it through. So I actually waited till it was all the way through, and then I pushed the bearing back on once it's bolted back on that other side so that you don't have to worry about it. Just my personal opinion. If you need to replace the seal in there, well, find a different video, I guess, because I'm not doing those ones in this. I'd imagine you just take that bearing off, and then you could probably pull this off, and it's probably not much harder to get on. But this tractor I'm actually doing for a friend of mine. He gave me the seals and said to replace those ones. He didn't say anything about the ends. It actually doesn't leak from there or here. It was just leaking around the back sides, and it was dripping on both sides of the transmission. So we're just doing those ones on this. So, but otherwise, if you get this far, I would imagine you can keep going and do that seal in there. So next up, I'm going to take that gear out, and I'll actually show you what that looks like. All right, so this is that big gear I was talking about. Dropped it out the bottom. I left it in the pan so that it would catch it for me. There's still, even after I drained it, there's still a decent amount of oil that drips down. So I wear gloves because it's an oily mess. Do make note, that side sticks out farther than this side, and it only goes back in one way. So when you put it back in, your longer side has to face the outside of the axle. I will then just take this and throw it in a tote, and then I'll clean this out because there is a seal on top of this pan or gasket that you're going to want to replace. If you have a parts washer or brake cleaner or just lots of towels, you can get it all cleaned up. All right, so next up is to get at the seal on the left side of the transmission. I start by taking off these 4 bolts. You don't have to do that step, but I'm replacing that gasket anyway, so I might as well just take it off. And then I'm actually going to take it apart right here at the this right side of the axle extension, because I want to check on the brake condition in there, because like I said before, your brake is inside this part, so I just want to make sure it's not destroyed or anything like that or worn out. And then I will move on to the left side. All right, and just like that, it slides right out. So you can see the axle goes all the way through this piece into that seal we're trying to replace. And you just need something to set it on because the bottom will still be oily and you kind of want to protect that. Here's your brake. So as that right there, that spins, better view at it. This part will spin with your wheel or with your axle. It's all fixed together. So it spins inside of this. Oop. You push your brake pedal, it pulls it tighter. That's how your brake works. So looks like we still have some brake life left in this. And now we get to pull off this tube to get that seal. So it's similar to this side, the same bolt pattern. The bolts go all the way around. Just pull them off this and it should just pop right off. All right, so we finally have it off. I had to tap a little bit on the end with a hammer, but mostly it's just grabbing it and wiggling it back and forth, and it slid right off. So you can see in here, there's the weep hole. There's all the oil that was running around it, showing that this seal is in fact bad. So we're gonna rip this part out and then put in a replacement. So when it comes to actually getting this seal out, I would imagine there's different ways to go about it. Maybe different people have different methods. I personally have no reason to keep the old seal because I already have new ones and I know that they fit, so I can destroy it as long as you don't damage the outside edge where the new one goes in. Otherwise it will leak. So something I like to do is I take the claw of a hammer, I slide it in and just kind of yank on it, and then work my way around. Because like I said, I have no reason to keep this seal. It's garbage. I already have new ones. So yeah, that's one way to do it. If you do it that way, be careful that you don't let the claw part touch the inside, because like I said, you got to keep that smooth. You don't want to scratch it up. If you didn't like that way, maybe find a video that shows a different way of like getting the seal out and then come back. But now we're gonna move on to putting in the new one. All right, so I have my seal back in. I couldn't really film it because it kind of takes two hands to do it. But I'm gonna tell you a couple different ways to go about it. One way is you can take a hammer and hold this up with one hand and gently go around the outside and just slowly tap it back in. Another way is you can take the old seal and push it up against it and then tap on that with a hammer if you're worried about damaging this one. Another way you can go about it is if you get a big socket, you can hold the socket up against it and tap the back of the socket. That would help with also making sure that you're not actually tapping on the seal itself. But if you're very careful, you can just tap right on this. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. And then you just work backwards to get it put back together. So what I would do personally is I would take your axle cover and put it back on there. That way it's all one big piece. And then you can see there's an alignment pin down there, and then there's also one in the top that's still in that piece over there. And when you put it back on, that way it will line up that axle going in and you can see what you're doing. So that way, if you were to put that axle cover back on first and then try and slide this in from the end of it, you can't see the end of that shaft and you might stab the end of your bearing or something and damage it. You don't want to do that. You also need to be able to grab this and you can move it back and forth so that way the teeth line up in there. That's why I had the PTO cover off. And then just kind of work your steps backwards so you can put that gasket back on, put that cover back on. Same with the end down there. You can start to slide your axle back in through there. You'll have to hold up that ring gear that we took out, and then there should be a washer too. So once that's all slid back together, then you can put that bearing back in from the back side. And then there just should be a nut and washer and that little goofy clip that's sitting over there. And then that's pretty much it. It's all back together. You can start working on putting your platform back together, hooking your pedals and springs back up, and put your PTO back on and just kind of work from what you did in the beginning forward, and then just take it and do it backwards and put it all back together. So thank you so much for watching. That pretty much wraps up my video. This tractor too, I talked to the client and he just wants the rear end fixed. He wants to do the paint job with his father, I believe, because this is their tractor. The tractor's actually been in the family since new. So, you know, more power to you if you want to do like a family restoration, but you didn't feel comfortable with the rear end work and you want to set it off, that's fine. So thank you so much for watching. Stick around and we're going to be getting back into that John Deere B back there.